Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is part 2 in this little finance series. If you guys haven't seen the first one, I'm going to leave a link to it down below in the description box. And once the third one is up, I will also have it down below in the description box in case you're watching this in the future once these videos have been out for a while. So we have a lot to cover today and I am so excited just to talk about all things budget related. I've gotten so many requests to do a video talking about the envelope system and how my husband and I do like a cashless cash envelope system. So I'm going to break that all down for you guys in today's video. I'm going to talk to you guys about how we do that, why we do that, how we still use credit cards. So there's a lot to unpack. I hope you guys are ready for it. I also want to make this like as casual as I can. Like it's something that I'm excited to talk about and we're going to talk about money and like serious things, but it's also just a casual conversation with you guys. I'm not a money expert. I didn't go to school for finances, not an accountant or anything like that. But like I mentioned yesterday, in case you guys are new, we are a family of 4. So my name is Kayla, first of all. Hello, welcome. We've got 2 kids. It's my husband and I, and we have just over the years learned a few things to just kind of get us on a good path with our finances. The next video in this series, part 3, it's going to actually be a Q&A with my husband and I. I'm going to answer some of your questions about money that you guys sent me over on Instagram. So definitely make sure to stay tuned for that. If you missed the previous video, in that video I talked all about our expenses and I shared with you guys in that video what our real family of 4 expenses are. I break down my mortgage, I break down how much we pay for our power, our cell phone bills, like all of that. That figure that I mentioned in part 1 is really important because now when we talk about our budget, that's a number that you need. So I know that it's a lot of chatting. There's a lot, like I said, there's a lot to unpack. So let's start at the very basics in order to kind of go into how Joe and I budget. So whenever Joe and I do our money for the month, first of all, I'm the one that pretty much does the budget and we'll talk about that probably tomorrow in our Q&A. Normally what I do is on the very last day of every month, I sit down to do my budget for the next month, okay? There's a couple things that I have to know in order to set up my budget. So the first thing that I need to know is how much I got paid because of the fact that my income is variable. So with YouTube, it's not the same every month, but I do know that for a lot of you guys, most of you guys probably your income is like the same from month to month. So as long as you have your income, what you make or what your husband makes or what you and your husband makes, partner, whoever, you need to know how much money you guys are bringing in. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing that you need to know is your fixed expenses, which is what I covered in part 1 of this video. Your fixed expenses being what are those bills that are going to hit every single month. So you find out that number. In my case, I think my number, we'll just keep it simple, we'll keep it clean. I think it was close to $4,000. Fixed expenses, meaning my mortgage, my car payments. If you guys were to have any like student loan debt, that would be considered a fixed expense because you have a monthly payment that you have to make on that. So if there's a credit card bill also, I didn't mention that in yesterday's video because Joe and I, we don't have student loan debt and we don't have credit card bills. But if you did have things like that you owe money on, that you pay regularly for, if you have anything that is a freaking bill, that is what you would consider a fixed expense. Okay, so I just burned the crap out of my mouth with my tea, so forgive me. I was like, my eyeballs just like swelled up with water because that's how bad I burned my tongue. But moving on. So for the purposes of this video, we're gonna keep things really clean and I'm gonna make up numbers as far as like how much money I make and how much money I owe in fixed expenses. So let's say that Joe and I together, we make $7,000 a month. So what I would do in that case is I would take the $7,000 and I would subtract our fixed expenses. If my fixed expenses were $4,000, then that would mean that I have $3,000 other dollars that I have to budget for. And that's what we're gonna cover in today's video. I'm actually gonna show you what our budget categories look like. I'm not gonna tell you exactly how much money I put in each of those, except for like the things like groceries and some of the ones that I know people ask a lot about. So in this example, basically what I'm trying to say is that after Joe and I pay our bills and after we pay our mortgage, all of the things that we have to pay, we have $3,000 that we have more control over. We have $3,000 to play with throughout the month that we can decide how we want to spend it. And that is what doing a budget is about. Doing a budget is just you deciding what your priorities are, you figuring out what you want to spend money on, what you want to save money for. And I'm here to tell you, like, this is one of the most empowering things that Joe and I have done as a couple. I've said this before in like all of my finance videos, but it's amazing how the minute that you start tracking your money, the minute that you start tracking how much money is coming in and how much money is coming out, and you know exactly where that money is going, it's amazing how you start to end up having more money in your bank account because you're so much smarter with your purchases. You can make better decisions instead of just being like, okay, I'll swipe my card here, swipe my card there, whether it's a credit card or a debit card. Like, you just don't know what you're spending money on. And a lot of times it's just like on crap that you don't need. So now that it's 2021, it's a new year, this is a time to set up a budget or to revisit this if maybe you've done this in the past and you kind of haven't stuck to it for a while. I know during Christmas time, December, we kind of veer off of our budget, but it's time to get back on track. And that's what I'm hoping this video just encourages you to do. So back to our example for today. Joe and I have $3,000 every month that we have to figure out how we want to spend it. So I'm going to tell you what our categories are. And I am, at the end of this video, going to, I'm trying to have my tea not spill on me. At the end of this video, I am going to show you what the app is that we use to track our money and how I set it up and all of that. I'm also going to show you guys like a couple other ways that you can track this using actual envelopes, using a piece of paper. Point is that some way or another, you're tracking this. But you might be old school. You might want to write this on a paper. You might want to use an app. And I'm going to talk about why we do that. So all of like the specifics of how we do it is coming. I'm going to try to cover that for you guys. But first, let's talk about our categories. So when it comes to doing a budget, you're the one that gets to decide how many categories you have. You get to decide what categories you have. And then you also get to determine out of that extra money that you have. That's what I consider your variable money, things that can change, that you can decide what you want to do with it. It's a little bit more fluid than the money that goes to your bills that you have to pay. You're the one that gets to decide how you want to break that down. So our categories, I will share with you guys. So I have a category for groceries. I have another one for dining out. Joe used to get lunch money when he was like going into work. Back in the day when he would like go out to eat with his coworkers and all of that, he did get some lunch money. Then, very important, I have spending money for myself and Joe has spending money for himself. And whatever amount of money we put in there every month, it's the same for both Joe and I. That's something that I always want to make a point of telling you guys, because that's a question that I get asked a lot, like, you know, who gets more money, or is your money his money? First of all of this money is our money together, okay? We do have joint accounts. Anything that I bring in, anything that he brings in, it is our money together. But what we do make it a point to do is we each get spending money throughout the month. So let's say we decide, hey, this month you get $200 and I get $200. Whatever number we come up with, it's the same for both of us, because he's not gonna go and spend $500 and then I only get like $100. It's not fair, that's not cool. So his spending money, my spending money. I also have a category that is personal care. So personal care is stuff like when I went to cut my hair, I use personal care money. When Joe gets a haircut, he pulls that out of that category. We choose to break it into like a separate category, but you don't really have to. I mean, this is technically spending money for the both of us. Like I'm gonna keep saying throughout this video, you're the one that decides what your categories are. You can be as specific as whatever the heck it is that you want. If you want a specific category that says shoes or hats, like you can get as detailed as you want, but sometimes that's not practical, like having a million different categories or a million different envelopes if you're using the actual envelope. So we break it up into spending and then personal care. Then I have a category, an envelope, whatever it is that you want to call it, for the kids. So that's spending money just for them. So if I want to buy them a toy, if I want to buy them new clothes for the season, if I just go to Target and there's just random things that I see there for them, they have their own like little category that goes into our budget every month. Then I have a category for gas. Super boring, nothing too exciting. I have another category that's for date night. I have movie rentals. I have another one for automotive, which is just like if our car needs new tires or if we need to service the car. I'm trying to make sure that in my budget, I'm constantly throwing just a little bit of money into something like that. And in essence, what I'm doing is I'm building a little savings account for the car, as well as a couple other things that I'm going to talk about now. So I have another category that is for healthcare. That's another one of those mini savings accounts. If you're not new to like this whole budgeting thing, that's what some people consider a sinking fund, which is a line item in your budget that you're constantly adding to and you're saving up money in there. So it's kind of like rollover money that if you don't use it in 1 month, you get to continue to add it to the next month. By the way that we do our budget, a lot of these categories are kind of rollover. I think the only one that's not rollover is groceries. And is there something else here? I would say like the only one that's not rollover is like gas or groceries. Like everything else almost is kind of like, if I don't use it in 1 month, I just continue to add it into like this little savings account. Let's keep going. I've got healthcare, I've got travel, and travel is just like a really fun thing to include into my budget at this point. You know, we have the ability to have that as a separate little line item in our budget. And I add money into our budget for travel, even if we're not traveling like in that moment. The point is that we're constantly saving so that when we decide we do want to take a trip, we can look at that category and say, okay, how much money do we have already saved? And then we can pull money from there for, you know, if we decide to go to Disney, if we decide to go wherever it is that we're gonna go. So that's been something that I've enjoyed adding to our budget. I have another category for home improvement. So that's just anything around the house that I want to buy stuff for. If I want to buy Christmas decorations, I take money out of that home improvement. There's a project around the house. If Joe goes to Lowe's and he buys stuff, like today he went, I don't even know what he bought. He bought like random boring stuff. That's where that money comes from. And then we have another category for gifts, which is anything that we donate, or if it's somebody's birthday or whatever the case is, we have one that's for gifts. And I have another category that's called family activities. That's like if Joe and I want to take the kids to go get ice cream, or we want to go to a museum one day eventually when things are open again, or if we want to go to the zoo. Fun family stuff like that, we have another separate little envelope that's just for that. And then the thing with these categories and the things that you put in your budget is that as things come up, you can add different categories, you can take away categories. Like for example, when I found out that we were gonna have to stay in a hotel for my sister's wedding that just passed, we calculated how much the room was gonna be, and I think we started saving like maybe 5 or 6 months ago. I created a little envelope, a little category that said Brittany's wedding, and we started adding money into that category like 6 months ago. So that way, when we finally did stay there, we had the money already saved. I did that with her wedding. I also did that for Christmas. So I started saving for Christmas, again, like 4 or 5 months before Christmas actually came. So that way I wasn't just like blowing all of our money come December. But those are the different categories that we have in our budget. Your budget is gonna look very different from anybody else's budget, and it's gonna totally depend on what your life looks like, what your lifestyle looks like, what your priorities are, and all of that. So I'm trying to look through my list here, see what else I wanted to tell you about these particular categories. So groceries, I did want to tell you what our normal budget is for groceries. So right now we have budgeted for our groceries $600 a month, in addition to the other like $244 that I talked about in the last video, which is like our meat subscription service thing that we do for our meat. So every month I have $600 to spend on other groceries. And I know that for some people that's a lot, and sometimes I will tell you that I don't use the full $600, but because we have it and we're able to do it, I kind of bump up my grocery bill, because I've also been like kind of working on my little stockpile in the basement, like our little prepper pantry. So I always buy like a little bit more than what I need. So that's why my budget right now is $600. So now that we have our categories, now that we have decided what we're gonna put in our budget, the next step is to figure out like how much money you are going to assign to each of those categories. So again, back to our example, if after I finish paying off my bills, I have $3,000 left to figure out what I wanna do with, that's where I'm gonna take those $3,000 and say, okay, how much money am I gonna put for groceries? $600, like I said, okay, $3,000 minus 600. So now I have $2,400 left. Where am I gonna put the rest of that money? That's the part that takes me the longest, because I really have to look at our categories and I have to figure out, like, some things are pretty standard from month to month. Like for gas, right now, honestly, we're not spending a ton in gas. Like we have had our trips to Miami that we've been driving a bit more than usual. So we've bumped up the gas budget, but on a typical month, like we're not spending more than $200 on gas, if even that. So like those things are kind of the same every month. When Joe used to have lunch money, it wasn't more than like $100 a month. The groceries is pretty fixed, always $600 a month. So I have certain things that like I know more or less what money I'm gonna put in those categories. But then I have to like take a few minutes and kind of think about our month ahead, right? And think about what's going on. If I know for a fact that, let's say, you know, we've got a lot of doctor's appointments that month coming up, then I know that for healthcare, I should maybe put a little bit extra money in there, and then that leaves us with less money for other things. But I'm trying to prioritize my budget and my categories and think about what, you know, I'm gonna need more money for. We'll kind of look at different things. If there's like a house project that we really want to work on, then I might allocate a little bit more money there. Then I'll look at the spending money, figure out how much money Joe and I are gonna get. Then this is really important, and I'm not sure how well I explained this, but we do also make it a point to include money within our budget for either paying off debt or saving extra money. So let's talk about that for a second. So let's say that you have student loan debt, okay? You already have your monthly payment, which is considered like a bill, right? Which you pay as part of like your fixed expenses. But if you're trying to pay that off even faster, if you're trying to get rid of some of that student loan debt, then you might create a category in your budget that's called debt payoff. That means that if you have extra money at the end of the month, you're putting a certain amount of money towards paying off that debt, towards paying off that credit card debt, whatever kind of debt it is that you have. Even if it's like you want to put extra money towards your mortgage, that's something else that you can do, and that's something that we always add into our budget. So I'll kind of look at the numbers, and if after groceries and after all of those categories that I mentioned to you, let's say that I filled up all of those categories with $2,000. I had $3,000 to start with. I allocated $2,000, and let's say I have an extra $1,000. I'll look at that 1,000 and I'll say, okay, what do I want to do with this? You know what? Maybe this month we'll throw that whole $1,000 towards the car so we can pay off our car faster. Those are all decisions that Joe and I have to make. It's just, what do you want to do with your money, right? I don't necessarily have to throw extra money towards a car. I could totally give Joe an extra $500 and me an extra $500 to go and buy whatever the heck we want. But we're just prioritizing what makes the most sense for our family in that given month. I think also that it is smart to factor in savings into your budget. The only reason I don't have it as an actual category here is because Joe and I already have a good savings chunk. If we want to talk about savings really quick, first of all, I will say that Joe and I are Dave Ramsey fans. We don't follow Dave Ramsey 100%. We kind of do some of the baby steps a little bit out of order, but if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, he has like different steps that you should, you know, work towards, like financial goals that you should work towards, and he lists them in a specific order. So he always says that you should start off trying to have $1,000, I think, in your bank account. That's like baby step number 1. Then I'm pretty sure that baby step number 2 might be paying off all of your debt. I don't know. Like I said, I know the steps, but I don't always do them in order. We are fans of him. I listened to his podcast for years. He has like a lot of really good practical information, and really at the gist of what he says is just that you need to be living within your means. You have to be living within your means or below your means. If you make a certain amount of money, you shouldn't be spending more than that. Joe and I have always really tried to stick to that. And so going back to savings, we've gone through those baby steps. I think like the third baby step that Dave Ramsey talks about is having a 3 to 6 month what does he call it, like an emergency fund in your bank account, in your savings account, your checking account or whatever. Have 3 to 6 months of your like salary. That's good for a rainy day. God forbid you have an emergency where somebody loses your job or whatever. You have a good cushion that you can fall back and rely on. And so Joe and I have already gotten to that point. So Joe and I, in our savings account, we have a nice little, you know, savings nest egg, whatever you want to call it. And that's in addition, like totally separate from the money that we have in our budget every month, the stuff that we have envelopes for. So our savings is like totally, you know, separate from that. The other thing that we already do, and that is again totally separate from our envelopes and our categories, that if you don't already do, you also want to factor that in, is we do have our investments. I'm not sure what our percentage is that we save for like our 401k, IRA, whatever it is you want to call it. Joe has one through work, and then I used to have one when I was working in a corporate job. Like from the time that I was 18 years old, I was back like when I was working at the hospital, I used to make, you know, full-time income. It wasn't like a ton of money. I think like my first job, I was making like $11 an hour. But even at that point, I was always making sure that from my paycheck, I don't know what the percentage was also, like maybe, I don't know, 15% of my paycheck was automatically being sent to a 401k. So that account has just kind of sat there, and it's grown over time just because that's how those things work. They just grow and grow and grow. If the stock market is doing well. So I have that little account, and I think there's like over $70,000 in that account. And I tell you that because if there's one tip that I can give anybody, is to start saving for retirement like as soon as you can. Like some of you guys asked me on Instagram, what's your best advice for people in their 20s? Start investing now. Start putting your money in an IRA, in a 401k, a Roth. Look into all those options, because the earlier that you can save, the more money you're gonna have when you retire because of compound interest. You know, this was an account that I started when I was a baby. When I was 18 years old, every paycheck, the money already came out of my paycheck, so I never even saw it. I never really felt it because I didn't count on that money. Here I am 12 years later, without even having contributed to it for like the last few years, I have money sitting there that continues to work for me, that continues to grow. But anyway, I have that one from my job. Joe also has one with his job that he's been adding to. So point is, retirement, investment and stuff, we already have that covered. But we could definitely add more money to our investments, or we can put like a higher percentage or whatever it is that we're contributing and kind of work on getting that maxed out. Because I think there is a point where like you max out and you can't add more money to it. But point is, if you don't have money set aside for investments, that's something that you're also going to want to factor in after you pay your fixed expenses. So now I'm sure that I've talked about a bunch of stuff and maybe you're lost. I'm sorry if you're lost. You can definitely ask me any questions down below and I'll answer them for you guys. So now I'm sure you guys want to see how I do this, how I track it, how you can track your budget and all of that, like the practical, how does this work? Like, it's great, you've got your categories, you figure out how much money you want to spend every month. Like now what do you do? So I'm gonna move you guys, we're gonna do a little change of scenery. We're not going super far, I just wanted to like have access to the stuff that's here on my desk. So once you guys have your categories, you have to figure out how you're gonna track it. That's the most important thing about having a budget. It means absolutely nothing if you create a budget and then you're not tracking where your money is going. And I mean, like, every time that you go to Starbucks, every time that you go to McDonald's, every time that you buy yourself a new shirt, every time that you go to Target, where's that money coming from? Where in your budget are you pulling that money from? That's like the whole point of having a budget. So back in the day, Joe and I used to use these little envelopes. And if you guys are into like the whole cash envelope system and you're gonna use physical cash, or you just want these envelopes to kind of like keep you organized, I'm gonna link these down below. You can get them super cheap on Amazon, but this is what these envelopes are literally used for. So you've got envelopes that you can essentially put real physical dollar bills in here, or you cannot. We'll talk about both ways. So I would have envelopes for all of those things that I mentioned earlier. I would have an envelope that said groceries. I would have a separate envelope that said personal care. I would have a separate envelope that said Joe's lunch money. And what I would do is I would go to the bank at the beginning of the month or the last day of the month, whatever the case may be. And if I had $3,000 to stuff in these envelopes, if I had $3,000 after my fixed expenses were paid, then I would go to the bank and I would ask for $3,000 and I would take that home with me. Mind you, I was like super anxious. I was like, oh my God, somebody's gonna rob me. I have $3,000 on me. But I would take it home and then I would fill up each of these categories, each of these envelopes with whatever money it is that I said I would put in there. So for groceries, I would put $600 in here. And that is how much money I would have for the entire month. So then when I went to do my groceries, if I went to Publix and I spent $120, I would open up my envelope and pull out $120, and that's what I would give to the person. That was just a very simple, easy transaction. I will tell you where it got complicated was like when I would go to Target and I would buy groceries. I would also buy myself a pajama. I would also buy something for the kids. And I had transactions that were like for a lot of different things. In those cases, sometimes I would pay for it out of like one envelope, and then I'd have to go home, look at my receipt, and I would have to figure out like, okay, if my pajama was $20, okay, I need to pull $20 out of my envelope and put it back in the envelope that I took it from. And I would have to do a little bit of reconciliation and try to figure out where the money was actually supposed to come from. So that's where it gets a little tricky. Sometimes just to save myself that hassle, I would go to Target and I would do separate transactions. I would tell them, you know, do you mind if I do separate transactions? And I would pay for my pajamas and take it out of my personal spending envelope, and I would pay for whatever it is that I bought the kids and I would pull it out of their envelope. But that was the gist of how I used the envelopes. So I have a lot of different feelings about using physical cash. When we first started with this method, I did like actually using the cash because it's very simple. You know, if you have $50 in here and you're reaching in here and you only see $50, you're like, okay, I only have $50. It's a very basic concept. I do think that there's something like in psychology where you want to spend it not as much because like you're actually giving somebody the cash, and like there's something about seeing the dollar bills in here that made you want to like hold on to them a little bit more. At least they did for me. Maybe you don't care, you want to just spend all of the money, but I think that there was something to that about, you know, not wanting to spend as much when you could actually look at it and see it, as opposed to having this like, you know, imaginary number and you can't really touch it or anything like that. That being said, ever since the pandemic hit and all of that, when COVID came around, Joe and I didn't want to have to go to the bank and we didn't want to have to go and be touching cash. And I know that a lot of people feel that way and they don't want to be handling the cash, you know, exchanging cash and all of that. So I get it. I get that people don't want to use cash. The good news is that you can do this same system without physical cash. What Joe and I do now is we pay everything, like literally almost everything, with our credit card. And we have a credit card that's very good. It gives us good travel points, and that might be one of the reasons why you want to use a card in the first place. So we have our credit card. We pay for everything with the credit card. If we go to Target, we pay for it in the credit card. If we go to McDonald's, we put it on the credit card. The biggest thing is that at the end of the month, we pay off the credit card in full. We never have a revolving balance. We never have, you know, interest that we have to pay on the credit card. We use it simply as a way to get points, and then we pay it all off at the end of the month. Now, if you're sticking to your budget and you're using your credit card in that way, you're never gonna have to worry about going over budget or not having enough money to pay the credit card at the end, because you're accounting for all of the money that you spend. You're saying, you know what, I'm going to McDonald's because I have money in my lunch money envelope. You're buying things that you can afford, that you have money for right now in your account, and you're not getting yourself into a situation where you're just throwing things on a credit card and you don't know how much your balance is, and you say, okay, whatever, I'll pay this 10 years from now, I don't care. So that's one of the reasons why we have loved this system. That being said, Joe and I could very well still be using these envelopes, and that might be something that you want to look into. So I could be writing groceries here, and I could say, okay, we've got $600 for groceries. On the back of this little envelope, there's an actual ledger. I could fill this in right here and have the balance of $600. I could write the category over here, and every time that I went to the grocery store, I could fill this in. I could say what day we went to the grocery store, where we went, is that what it says, where? Yeah, where we went, and then how much money we spent. And then I could have a running tally all the way down here, and that would tell me at any given time how much money there's still in this envelope. So even though we're still paying for it in our credit card, we could totally still track it here. And like I said before, that is the most important thing, is that once you have your budget, you're tracking it some way. So once you have the categories and you have your budget, you're just trying to figure out how you're going to track this to keep yourself accountable, because that's one of the hardest things. Is you get busy, you go out on a Sunday, you spend a bunch of money, and then you forget to track it, and then 2 weeks from now you're like, oh wait, I forgot. You're not gonna forget if you're using physical cash, because you're always gonna know exactly how much money you have, because the cash is coming out, and you're always gonna be able to look in here and say, oh okay, I have $20 left. If you're not using physical cash, it is super important that you're tracking it. Otherwise, you're gonna think you have more money left than what you really do. I hope that makes sense. So one way that we could do that is by using the ledger back here on these envelopes. If you don't have these fancy budget envelopes, you could do the same thing with any other envelope, okay? You could just get a white envelope, and on the front, write the category. You say, okay, this is how much I have. And then every time that you spend something that relates to that category, just go marking it off and writing how much you have left. Very easy. You could also do something as simple as just taking like any notebook and making like little columns like this. Throughout the month, as you go buying your groceries, you just start deducting that money down here, and then you have a running total of how much you have left at the bottom, or every time. Let me show you. So like if I went to Publix, I could even write the date, and I could put $120. So that would mean I have $480 left. See, just something simple like that. And then the next time that you go to do groceries, you know, okay, I have $480 left. That's what I have to work with. And you just go subtracting throughout the month. This is all just figuring out what way you're gonna track it best. What's gonna be the easiest for you. A lot of people will also use just spreadsheets on Excel, and they'll have different columns, and they'll start just subtracting money every time that they buy something. Every time that they buy something out of that category, they open up their computer, log into Excel. That's definitely something that you could do too. So Joe and I, over the past couple years, we've tried the envelope with no money in here, tracking it on the back, and we liked it. It's not that it was a bad method, but what we found was that if the envelope was not with us at all times, we would often forget. We would often forget to track it. So what we ended up doing that has worked the best for us is we have an app on our phone, and I've shown you this app before, but we're gonna dive into it more in detail now so you guys can see how you set it up and all of that. But it's an app called Goodbudget. And then over here, it's a little dark, but whatever, I'm just trying to show you. This is an app that I can literally just open up here on my phone. Joe and I can both access it at any time, as long as we use like the same username and password. We both have access to it all times. It has all of our categories, and it has how much money is left. And then every time that we're out and about, we're spending money, we can just open this up, go to that category, and we can write, you know, hey, I spent $50. It subtracts it from your total, and it has just been the best for just the convenience factor and for helping us to stay on top of it and not forgetting to track any of our purchases. So if you want to see how I set that up, it's gonna be like the last part of this video, so just bear with me, or you can just kind of like fast forward to that part. But that is the basis of what we do with our money. We figure out how much money we brought in every month, and the only reason why sometimes that takes a little bit more time is, like I said before, my income varies. So Joe's income is always fixed, but what I bring in from YouTube, it does fluctuate. And like in December I had a great month. This month now in January hasn't been the best, so I know that I'm not gonna have as much money in my budget to work with than I did maybe a previous month. And honestly, like for us, really the only thing that we really need to budget for, like essentials that's in this budget list, is our groceries, right? All of our other bills have been paid in our fixed expenses, so whatever money we have left after those bills, we have money to eat. Obviously that's like the most important thing, is to make sure that you're feeding yourself, feeding your family. Everything that's extra after those $600, if we have $200 extra to spend, or $300, or $6,000 extra dollars to spend, like that's all dependent on how much money I bring in that month. But whatever the case is, all of that is really extra. I would definitely say that if you have some debts that you have to pay, paying off that debt and making sure that some of that money goes towards paying off that debt should probably be prioritized a little bit more over some of that other fun stuff. Maybe you're not going out to eat at a restaurant as much. Maybe you're not having extra money to buy yourself new clothes all the time. Like there's nothing more freeing than getting to the point where you don't have a bunch of debt, because once you don't have like all this debt like hanging over your head, you have so much more money then to just use for whatever else you want, or to save, or to go on a vacation. So the faster you can chip away at that debt, in my opinion, right? I'm not an expert, I can't tell you how to live your life, it's just what we choose to do, the better. I did get questions about like, well, you know, have you and Joe ever like been in debt before and all of that. I'm sure we will talk about it more in our Q&A, but there was a time when I met Joe where, first of all, I wasn't making nearly what I was making now. Like having YouTube and stuff, I didn't make this kind of money. So Joe always made way more money than I did, but he was like a single guy, and he like lived in his apartment, and he had a good full-time salary, but he did buy a bunch of like new furniture, and he was always like, you know, buying the new TVs and stuff. And I think at one point he had maybe like, I don't know, maybe close to $10,000 in credit card debt. There was another time when we moved into our new house, I think we had like $6,000 on a credit card from a furniture company to like for all of our furniture, and we would chip away at them every month. Like we would have to say, okay, if this month we have an extra $500, like instead of doing something fun with those $500, we have to like freaking throw it towards paying off the couch. So we kind of have always like just tried to like get rid of debt. That's why like we're really hustling now, so that I can just like pay off my car. I think I told you guys yesterday in the previous video that we have like $6,000 left on my car to pay off. And in theory, in my savings account, I have $6,000 that I could just use it to just totally pay off the car. But that's like one of the biggest examples where like me and Dave Ramsey, like I don't follow him 100%, because he would tell me, you know what, if you have money in your savings account, just use it to pay off the car so you don't have any debt. I am kind of more conservative with the money that I have in the bank, and sometimes I just want to have that extra cushion, and I want it sitting there in case God forbid happens and we need to have some extra money to pay our bills and things. So we kind of do like a good balance. Like I'm not gonna throw all the money that I have in my savings account towards the little debts that we have, but if I needed to, we could pay it off. We're gonna probably have that paid off in the next couple months. So anyway, why don't I get my computer out and I can show you guys how we set up our budget every month through Goodbudget. If you guys are still here, if you're still listening to me talk about money, thank you for being here. I know that this video was super long, and if you're not interested in, you know, watching like the whole app part, then thank you for being here. I love you, goodbye. But I know that a lot of people just like to see how you actually do this stuff. So that's what I'm gonna show you now. Let me go get my computer. Okay, so like I said, the app that we use is called Goodbudget, and this may not be the app that works for you. Honestly, it's a little bit involved to figure it out. It's a little tricky, but once you get it set up, it works wonders. But there's a bunch of these other apps, I'm sure, that you can do some research, find on your phone, and it just helps you to keep track of the money that you're spending. But this is the one that we use. It's called Goodbudget, and it's not free. Okay, I'm gonna tell you that. I think it ends up being like $5 a month, but for us, it's well worth the price. I'm not gonna log into my account because I wanna show you guys what it's like to sign up and to start your budget. So let's go here. There is a free version, I think. I want to say that there's a free version, but you don't get as many like categories. Like there's a limit to how many categories you have. I don't know. We're gonna find out now. So we're gonna go in here, start your Goodbudget. Let's create a email and password. So plan, I'm gonna put here free, and let's see what happens. Welcome to Goodbudget. Let's start setting up your budget. Let's do it. So this is what I normally do. So it's got 2 of them set up for me. So over here you have your envelopes. So once I figure out what my categories are and how much money I want to put in them, normally what I'll do is I'll open up an Excel spreadsheet and I will try to figure out how much money I can put in each of the envelopes so that I can do like a whole little like summation thing at the bottom, so that if I have $3,000 to work with, I can play around with the numbers so that I have an even $3,000 put in the envelopes. But once I know groceries, $600, personal spending, $200, once I have the numbers down, I open up this and I set this up. So I'm gonna go over here to add and edit my envelopes. And here's where you can add your envelopes, you can customize them. Kayla spending, gas, groceries. We'll do over here just kids spending. We'll do another one that's for travel. And then I can figure out whatever those numbers are, right? $200 for me. We'll give the kids $300. We'll put $150 for travel. Whatever the numbers are that you have already decided. So that's what I'll do here. I'm gonna save these changes. I left groceries and gas, whatever they decided to put. So that's step 1, is adding those little categories. So once the categories are there, the amounts are there, the next thing that I will do is I'll go up here where it says fill envelopes. And here is where I set the amount, not add, I set the amount to whatever it is that we've decided the amount is gonna be. So $240 for gas, I will hit set $100, set $200, set to $300, set to $150, so that green bar is going all the way to the right, and that is how much money is here. There's this like little technical thing here, like to get this to work, what I have found is that this number that's over here in red, this $990, it's essentially telling me where the heck did you get these $990. So I go over here to the top and I just put $990 in this amount field, and then I hit save. And then it's telling me, okay, all the money's been accounted for. So now you have your categories over here on the left, and that means that you have access to now putting in these transactions. If you do go to the grocery store, you can track it this way. And the way that you can do it is either on your phone or you can log into the computer and you can do it that way too. So what you're doing here is essentially the same thing that you would be doing on your envelope, like on the back of your envelope, you would be tracking your purchases. The only difference is that you're doing this virtually. You're doing this either on the computer or on your phone. So that way, regardless of where you are, if you're at Target, if you go to Target and you go somewhere later, instead of like waiting to get home and forgetting to track it, you can literally just take out your phone and you can do it then and there. Or you can just, you know, when you get home, you can go onto your computer. It's the same thing. It's just another method to do it, a little tech savvier version of doing it. So let's show you on the computer first, and then I'll show you guys on my phone too, in case it makes any difference. I'm pretty sure it's the exact same thing. So I'll hit up here, add transaction. So this is easy to kind of go through. I will say that on the phone it's a little easier, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that you could figure this out too. So let's say we did go to Publix, okay, and we spent $100 on groceries that week. I'm gonna select which envelope it comes out of. So that came out of the groceries envelope, and that is it. You could write notes. You could say weekly groceries. If you had like a special occasion, if you bought a cake, if it was somebody's birthday, you can write whatever notes you are, which is something that's helpful because you can go back later and just figure out what exactly it is that you bought. And then you hit save, and then you see this little green bar here. Now it shows you that instead of having $240 in your little account here, you only have $140. So it's a great visual to see where you're at, and it's also just a great way for you to automatically see how much money you have left at any given time. And then here on the computer, it's nice because it's gonna list all of your transactions, and as the month goes by, you can kind of look at them, you can see what has been spent. I like this because I can see like what Joe has been spending, and it kind of gives me a good at a glance like look at what we've been doing with our money. So I hope you're still with me. I hope that makes sense. The first time that I used this app, I'm gonna tell you, it was confusing. And at first, like Joe is the one that actually found this, and I was like, oh, that's too complicated. I don't know that that's gonna work. And for me, it has worked so well, and it takes a little bit of practicing. It takes a little bit of just going in there, creating an account, starting to create your envelopes, put the total, and just start using it. At least for me, for us, it is great because it gives us what we were looking for. It gave us a way to track our money where we can both see at any given time. Like I said, Joe has this on his phone. It's an app on his phone. It's an app on my phone. So we can always see how we're doing in terms of our budget. Now I'm gonna do a little screen recording here on my phone to show you what it looks like because you might want to see that view too. So you'll go to Goodbudget and I'm gonna type in the same username and password that I used on the computer. It's gonna sync your transactions, and this is what this looks like. This is exactly what I see when I log in here. Only difference is that my monthly budget, when I look in here, I've got a lot more categories in this like little test account here. So same concept. Let's say that I was to go to Target and I bought, I don't know, what did I buy at Target? What have I been seeing that I really want? See, I bought some black combat boots that were really cool. So I would go in here where it says Kayla spending, and I would click this little thing on the top right corner, the little note thing, and I would type in the payee. And as you go, like recording transactions and stuff, like your most frequently used things start to like auto-populate. So I'm putting that I went to Target, I spent $29.99 on those combat boots, and it's coming out of the Kayla spending account, and I can write notes here. I can say combat boots, and I'm gonna save it. And then, okay, look, I have $170.01 left for the month. On the bottom, you can see that it's listing those things that you bought, and you can always look at them and see, okay, what did Kayla buy? Oh, she went to Target and she bought combat boots. Again, if I were to go the next day to Target and buy something else, that was $19.99. I went to Target, I can record that, same concept, write another note. Let's say I bought cookies and Sour Patch Kids, and then I can save that. And again, that little green bar keeps sliding backwards, and it tells me, okay, now I have $150 left. So I should probably be careful, because if I'm not careful, then I'm gonna blow my budget before even like the third day of the month. So that is what the app looks like. I think it's a great concept. I am gonna show you one more thing because I think it'll be helpful. So let's pretend that it's the end of the month, okay? Let's pretend that it is the next month. This month, I really didn't go back to Target, okay? I only spent those 50 bucks at Target. So let's say the next month, I wanna give myself more money because it's a new month, it's a new budget, and I get to add to this like little spending money savings account that I have for myself. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go back to my computer, right? It's a new month. This is what I do once a month when I'm setting up the budget for that month. We're just pretending that we skipped ahead a month. I'm gonna look at how we did, and in this pretend scenario, I really didn't spend a lot of money that month. But if I have more money to add here, it's very simple to do that too. You can go add edit, and here you're gonna add the new totals. So if I finish the month off with $150.01, and normally I would do this on my Excel spreadsheet, but here I'm gonna do it on my phone. So remember, I went to Target twice. In total, I still had $150.01 left in that little envelope. Same concept as if I had $150 here in my envelope at the end of the month, and now I'm gonna add more money into here. We're just adding money into the envelope. That's all that we're doing. So let's say that it was a great month for me. We had a lot of extra money to play with, and I was gonna give myself $300 to spend. I would add those $300 to what I already had existing. I had 150 here, I'm adding another 300. So what's my total? I have $450.01 for the next month. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into the computer and I'm gonna write that new total here. And I'm gonna write $450.01. That's my new total that I'm working with that month. Same concept, if the kids had $300, let's say I didn't spend anything for the kids, this month they're getting an extra $100. We're gonna move that to $400, whatever your new total is. For travel, it's like a little mini savings account. So last month I had 150. This month we're gonna add another 150. So now there's a total of $300 there. If for groceries, my budget is always $600, I can put $600 here, whatever. Point is that you're making changes to your envelopes for that month that you're working on. I'm gonna hit save, and then I'm gonna go back to this thing here that says fill envelopes. And I'm gonna do the same thing that we did last time. Remember the first time that we did this? I'm gonna hit set, and I'm gonna say set to $600, set to $100. And we're just making it so that those envelopes are 100% full. And that way you can do that same process that month of writing down your transactions and having the bar go down. But you have to make sure that you're setting those categories to the new totals. So now remove the overage of $1,099.99, save it, and there you go. So now you have the new amounts that you're working with, and you can go spending your money and tracking it and knowing how much money you always have. So that is how Joe and I track our money, you guys, and I hope that was helpful. I know it's a mouthful, I know that it's a lot to cover, and maybe I didn't cover that 100% correctly, okay? I'm doing my best here, trying to share like the stuff that's already in my brain with you guys, and sometimes it's hard to understand unless you're in it and doing it. And so that's why, at the very least, I just hope that this video inspired you to start tracking your money. Start creating a budget somehow, some way. Like I said at the very beginning, I know that everybody's situation is different. I know that for a lot of people, you get money every month, you have your income, you have your paycheck, and after you pay your bills, maybe you don't have a lot of money left. Or maybe you have a lot of debt that you owe, and maybe, you know, you have so much debt or so many bills that even your paycheck doesn't cover it. Like, I know that that happens. I'm not dumb, I'm not ignorant to that. But that's even more reason to be tracking where your money is going and trying to be as responsible and as smart as you can be. Maybe cutting back on some expenses, right? We talked yesterday in the fixed expenses video about how sometimes if you want to have more money to work with in your envelopes and stuff, sometimes it's a good idea to look at your expenses and look at things that maybe you can cancel. Maybe you can cut your cable. Maybe you can delete a bunch of these apps off your phone that you pay for. You'd be surprised at how much you could save if you didn't have the Netflix and the Hulu and the YouTube Premium and, you know, all of those things that are subscriptions that hit your account every month that you may or may not even be aware of. But maybe it's the control freak in me, maybe it's whatever. Like, I love the fact that I know how much money I'm making. I know exactly where my money is going. I know exactly how much I'm allowed to spend every month. And that's another thing that I didn't talk about in this video because I've mentioned it before in the past. I'm gonna link to all of my cash envelope videos like down below in the description box in case you guys wanna check them out and kind of dive into why we started doing this in the first place and all of that. I'll have all of that down below. But there was a point in time when even if I was making like a crap ton of money, I didn't want to spend any money on myself. I'm by nature the saver in the house, and I felt really guilty spending money. I felt guilty going and buying myself some new clothes. I felt really bad because I was like, I should be saving this, or I should be putting this towards like a million other things. Like, I always felt very guilty about spending money on myself. The minute that I gave myself my own little line item in my budget, it did wonders for me because I didn't have to feel guilty anymore. I knew that if I had $300 in this little envelope for me that month, I can go and spend it on whatever the heck I want. And the same with Joe. So I didn't have to ask Joe for permission to buy stuff. Joe doesn't have to ask me for permission to buy stuff. I tell him, you can buy whatever the heck you want as long as you have the money in your envelope. If you have $300 in your envelope, don't tell me that you bought a PS5 because I know that's not $300. I know that's way more. So just kind of keeping ourselves accountable and making sure that we're only spending money that is in here. Now, if I want to save up my money, right? So that's like a thing that I will still sometimes do. Joe normally, when he gets $300 in this envelope, like the next day it's gone, it's empty, and it's empty for the rest of the month. So he has no problem spending his envelope money. And when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about like our virtual envelopes, but it's the same thing. It's just totally interchangeable. So if he were to get $300 a month, he usually spends it all. Whereas if I get $300 a month, maybe I'll spend 100 of it, maybe I'll spend half of it, maybe I'll spend even $200. So that leaves me with $100 in my envelope. And then when I get more money, it just adds up, and maybe 2 months go by and I really don't spend a lot of money, but then maybe in month 6 I spend a crap ton of money. Either way, that money has already been like allocated for me to spend, so I don't have to feel guilty because I saved up for it and then I went and I bought whatever it is that I wanted. So I have loved this system. You know, there's a million ways to do it. You can totally customize it to what you feel comfortable with. You can have 10,000 envelopes. You can have an envelope, like I said before, for shoes, for winter clothes, for saving up for a car. You could have a category that's for pet supplies. You could have one that's for diapers. You could have a category for whatever it is you want, or you can have two, right? You could say spending money and groceries. Like, it could be as simple as that if you wanted to make it that simple. So I encourage you guys just to take some time this new year and create some kind of system. This is what we do, this is what works for us. I hope it was helpful. I know that this is something that you guys have been wanting to see for a really long time, so I'm hoping that it didn't totally suck. Again, if you have questions about any of this stuff, you can leave it down below in the description box, and hopefully some of the questions that you have will be answered in the Q&A. So if the Q&A is live when you're watching this, I'll have it linked down below in the description box. If not, stay tuned, it'll be up very, very soon. But thank you for being here. I love you guys to pieces. Like always, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.